Are you living forward these days? Hey friends, it's Pastor Mike from Fellowship Church. Hope you're having a wonderful week. Hope you survived that little bit of snowfall we got this past weekend. Hope that you were safe. That question for you again. Are you living forward these days? October 2009, you may have seen this in the news a number of years ago. A C-130 airplane took off from a military base in Southern California. Now, the C-130 is also called the Hercules plane. It's a very large plane, 7 crew members on board. They were providing air support to a Coast Guard rescue operation. So the C-130 is out over the water. At the same time that the C-130 took off, a group of Super Cobra helicopters also took off from a military base in Southern California, different military base, and they too were doing some training exercises out over the water. At the same time, a man was searching for seashells on the shore with his son and reported seeing a large red fireball out over the ocean. Never a good sign. Friends, what had happened is that one of the helicopters had collided with that airplane, devastating destruction to both of them. The debris field on the water was 80 square miles. Search and rescue took place for several days, and eventually a Coast Guard spokesman reported that hope is no longer viable. I still remember that phrase, hope is no longer viable. What he said was, we're calling off the search because there's no reason to hope anymore. Friends, I wonder if that describes your life or the life of somebody you know and love. Because here's what can happen in life sometimes, and it happens especially acutely during the holidays. We lose hope. See, hope is the ability to live forward. It's the belief that God is working in the present and that God is also working in the future, and it allows us to live with a forward sense of perspective. Hope is living forward. Hope is living with some level of discomfort. Whether it's acute or something you've been living with for a while, hope is the belief that the future is compromised. Why? Because of what happened now or what happened in the past. And sometimes that pain can be physical, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's based upon grief, the loss of a loved one, sometimes it's simply based on other circumstances. Well, friends, people feel that most acutely during the holidays. So I'll bet you know people who are struggling to be hopeful this year now that we're in the Christmas season. Well, here's a story about Jesus. One day when Jesus was out speaking, the author Matthew wrote about Jesus in Matthew chapter 12, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. And a little farther down it says, and in his name the nations will put their hope. Get that? The nations, all the nations, not just Israel, all the nations will put their hope in him. What that means is they could look backward and remember all the promises of God, but ultimately they were capable of living forward. And friends, I'm wondering if you're living forward these days. Living forward requires a hope perspective. That is, the belief that God is still working out there in the future and that God is still doing good things. Friends, that's what hope is all about. But for a lot of people, they don't live forward, they live backward. Meaning the best part of life was back then, and we're going to continue to live by looking backward. Friends, God is always out working in the future, and that's where hope lies. And Jesus Christ came so that people like you and I would have hope even during the difficult seasons of life. May you be living forward during this holiday season and throughout the entire year. Why? Because hope is always viable as long as Jesus is there. Friends, I hope that gives you some hope. It certainly does for me. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will never snuff out. Hope that applies well to your life. Hope you have a wonderful week. Know that we love you and pray for you. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.